It's kind of useful to think of savoring as the counterpart to coping. How do we deal with, quote unquote, the good experiences and moments in our lives, which is the counterpart to how we deal with the negative or unpleasant or stressful parts of our lives. And on both ends, it really is a skill. Historically, the assumption has been that people just naturally experience pleasure in response to the positive things in their lives, but we've learned that that really isn't the case. There's quite a bit of variability in how people respond to the positive things that they experience. So what's a basic definition of savoring? Well, think about it as anything that helps prolong or intensify or just increase your contact with the positive aspects of a given moment or experience. Really immersing ourselves fully into this sensory and emotional experience of the positive things that we encounter every day. The invitation then is for you to really develop this skill to increase how much you can enjoy positive things, because the truth is, experiences won't always just hit you with really strong, pleasurable feelings. You ever find yourself looking back at the good times, the good stretches in your life, where you can recognize that there was a lot of really good stuff happening, but you maybe didn't even really fully notice it in the moment or fully experience it? Well, that's what savoring allows us to do better. And there are different ways to savor. There's savoring past experiences, which we might call reminiscing. There's even a way to savor experiences that haven't happened yet, to kind of look ahead to them. But the most fertile ground for developing this skill is on savoring present moments as they are happening. Here's a bit of what we know about the science and research on savoring. We know that some of us are more predisposed genetically to be good at the skill of savoring. Some people are able to keep positive feelings alive for longer, experience them more deeply, whereas for others, the automatic process is just that it seems to come and go more quickly. In fact, it's hard to pin down, but we at least know savoring is partly related to prolonged activation in the ventral striatum, and that higher activity in this part of the brain leads to greater psychological well-being and lower levels of cortisol. So better savoring amounts to better psychological well-being. We also know from research that as humans, we tend to, on average, experience about 3 times as many positive things as we do negative ones, which might seem surprising, and that in and of itself is evidence of how our brains work, which is a major challenge in the skill of savoring. Our brains aren't wired to notice those things. We've talked about this in other areas of this course already. What gets our attention far more immediately and with far more intensity is the negative things, the stressors, the threats, the worries. What doesn't get as much of our attention is those positive things we experience. And it turns out we experience a lot more of them on average than negative ones. And it's also harder for our brain to hang on to good experiences, to savor them. They're just not wired to do that. This is why that first bite of dessert is so good, and the 8th bite, it's like you're kind of used to it already. You can't recreate the experience of that first bite. Often those positive experiences are too quick for a transfer from short-term to long-term memory. And we also learn much faster from pain than we do from pleasure. So pleasurable things kind of hit and slide off like Teflon, whereas negative things, they have some Velcro and they really stick and get attached quickly. Here's a pretty cool concrete example of this. One research study showed people positive and negative images and measured their brain response to these images using fMRI. When participants were shown negative images, automatically their amygdala fired. But for the positive images, there was no such automatic brain activity. In fact, they didn't see comparable brain activity until participants were told to explicitly focus on those positive images. This just shows that savoring is something that we need to be intentional and purposeful about because our brain isn't going to do it for us. Here are some suggestions about how you can develop this skill of savoring. First, it takes a little bit of extra time and requires a little bit more absorbed focus, so slow down. It's impossible to savor things if you're too quickly on to the next thing. Try to create a little space around the experience. Hold off on rushing to the next thing, whether that takes a few extra seconds or a few extra minutes. Another suggestion is to really notice the details, the pieces, the images, the sensations that you experience physically, the emotions that you're having, of course. Try to pay attention to all of those details. almost like you're studying a beautiful piece of art and you really want to see all of the detail in it. Take the same approach to experiencing a positive or pleasurable moment. Some people are helped by taking a mental snapshot of the moment and really trying to make the effort to encode it into their long-term memory. It also helps to try to drill down into the experience. This is a skill we talked about with gratitude as well. Try to see who and what has come together to provide that pleasant moment for you. And then a very simple but highly effective way to increase the skill of savoring is when something good is happening, to recognize that it won't last. That sounds kind of pessimistic, but it can be a really powerful reminder to really show up to that moment, which is a moment and won't last forever, and has feelings that won't last forever. Appreciating that it is eventually going to end is a more powerful way to connect to it while it's still there. Another way is to just try to stay present with that experience. Resist your brain's urges to pull you off to someplace else or something else or the next stressor. And when your brain tries to do that, mindfully bring it back to that present moment. And then lastly, don't overdo this. Don't try to manufacture overwhelming and life-changing emotions. If you're trying too hard to savor, you won't be savoring. If you're having a good moment and what you're thinking about is, I gotta savor this, I gotta really savor harder, then you're not gonna savor it. You're just gonna be thinking about savoring. You don't have to make this life-changing. You don't have to expand it beyond what it is. Sometimes good moments will be huge. Sometimes they'll just be something you notice for a few seconds. Don't try to turn it into something that it's not.